Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling something our AI analysis, looking at the whole range of sources, has called human gambling.
Mm-hmm.
And, forget casinos for a second. This is much broader.
Right.
It's about that constant dance we all do with uncertainty, every risk, every decision, when we just don't have all the answers, like the human condition, really.
Exactly. Yeah, traditional gambling is part of the picture, sure.
Yeah.
But what's really fascinating here is how this idea, this human gambling, this, engagement with the unknown, it weaves through everything. Philosophy, questions about freedom, our scientific understanding of how fundamentally unpredictable the universe is.
All right.
Our evolutionary drives, the quirks of our psychology, even, the cultural stories and beliefs that shape us.
Okay, let's dive in then. The analysis points out this core human desire for certainty, right? We want things predictable. We crave that solid ground.
We really do.
But then it throws in this quote echoing Goethe about our demand for the unconditional. So it feels like right from the get-go we're facing this conflict.
That's the essential starting point, yeah. And connecting this, the AI pulls in existentialist thinkers like Sartre and Camus. They really wrestled with this.
Right, the absurd world idea.
Exactly. They argued we're born into a world without inherent meaning, an absurd world. And Sartre's famous line, condemned to be free. This radical freedom means every choice, every action, it becomes a kind of fundamental bet on who we are, who we're becoming. Because as they said, existence precedes essence.
We define ourselves as we go.
We define ourselves through our choices, yeah.
So, okay, deciding between coffee and tea isn't exactly an existential crisis.
Hopefully not.
But the principle's the same. Each decision, small or big, it kind of nudges us in a direction, shaping who we become, like little wagers on our future self.
That's it, precisely. And this is where it gets really interesting, I think. The AI connects this subjective feeling of uncertainty, the philosophical side, with the objective uncertainty that science tells us about the universe. Think quantum mechanics.
Okay.
The idea that at the most fundamental level, things are just probabilities until they're observed. The analysis even quotes physicist Nathan Harshman, saying these are uncertainties that do not derive from our ignorance, but are fundamental to matter.
Wow. So it's not just that we don't know.
It's that reality itself is inherently fuzzy, uncertain at its core.
So the very fabric of reality is a bit of a gamble. That's kind of mind-blowing.
It is. And then the AI brings in chaos theory. The butterfly effect.
Right. Tiny changes, massive differences later on.
Exactly. Even in systems that are technically deterministic, small initial differences blow up into completely unpredictable long-term outcomes.
Yeah.
So even if you could map out all life's starting conditions,
the end result is still a gamble.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
This sensitivity means even our best-laid plans or most calculated bets in life, career, relationships, they can just veer off unexpectedly.
Because of things we couldn't possibly foresee.
Precisely. It really highlights the unpredictability in complex systems. And life is, about as complex as it gets.
There's almost a weird comfort in that, though, isn't there? Like, maybe it's not always our fault when things go sideways.
That's one way to look at it. The AI even uses historical examples, like the American founders. What a huge gamble that was, creating a whole new form of government.
Totally uncertain outcome.
Far from guaranteed. And what's key is humans have always tried to manage this uncertainty. The analysis points out probability theory itself.
Yeah.
It grew out of studying games of chance. It was an attempt to get a handle on randomness, impose some order.
A very human thing to do.
Absolutely. And tying this back to the existential stuff, the AI suggests that knowing the cosmos is fundamentally chancy. It can actually amplify that existential angst.
Makes the personal stakes feel even higher.
It really can, when you see it against that backdrop of universal uncertainty.
Okay, so human gambling as a concept is this continuous stream of choices with unguaranteed outcomes. Much broader than just betting money.
Much broader. Careers, relationships, moral conduct.
Even pursuing knowledge.
Yes. And the stakes. There are well-being, happiness, fulfillment, survival, potential, legacy. Huge things.
And even not choosing avoiding risk, that's still a kind of unfolding into an unknown future, right? Yeah. Still a bet.
That's the definition the AI lands on, yeah. And it emphasizes the sheer scope. It's not just the big life-altering stuff.
Right.
It's the micro decisions, too. What you eat, your commute.
Yeah.
Small gambles, but they add up.
Cumulative effects.
Exactly. Then you have the major life decisions.
Yeah.
Career changes, marriage, having kids, high stakes, long-lasting consequences.
Yeah, huge gambles.
And then the AI talks about existential commitments. the values you live by, your search for meaning, how you face mortality. These are the ultimate gambles.
It really reframes everything, and the AI keeps coming back to that existential idea. Existence precedes essence. It's through all these gambles, big and small, that we actually create who we are.
That's the idea. So refusing to gamble, constantly dodging choices.
Could be seen as inauthentic, like bad faith.
That aligns with the existentialist view, yes. And the AI makes a really important point about how the nature of these gambles has evolved.
How so?
Early humans were mostly gambling against nature for survival. Basic stuff.
Right. Hunt or starve.
Pretty much. Today, we're navigating these incredibly complex social, technological, even existential risks like, advanced AI potentially.
Yeah.
The whole gambling table has gotten way more intricate.
Okay, so where does this tendency even come from? Why are we like this? The AI looks at biology, genetics.
Yeah, it touches on evolutionary psychology, the idea that maybe a tendency for risk-taking was adaptive for our ancestors.
To help find food, status, mates, explore.
Could be, that kind of thing. And what's interesting is the link to modern genetics.
Okay.
The AI mentions research finding, like over 120 genetic variants linked to being more risk tolerant.
Wow, that many.
Yeah, and this is crucial. The AI stresses that the effect of each gene is tiny. Genetics gives you maybe a predisposition, a nudge.
Not destiny.
Not destiny at all. It interacts massively with your environment, your experiences, your culture. The analysis notes that these polygenic scores, they only account for a really small percentage of the variation in risk tolerance.
So it's not some simple gambling gene, it's way more complex.
Much more complex interplay. And the AI also looks at the neurobiology, the brain chemicals involved in dealing with uncertainty.
Like what?
Well, noradrenaline seems key for detecting uncertainty. Acetylcholine helps us adapt when things are unpredictable, and dopamine kind of triggers action.
Gets us moving.
Right. And the prefrontal cortex, our executive control center, that's vital for weighing gains and losses. The AI points out loss aversion again.
That feeling that losses loom larger than gains.
Exactly. And how that shows up in brain activity, especially under stress. This whole biological setup heavily influences how we approach life's gambles.
So how do we learn to navigate all this? The AI brings in developmental psychology, points to adolescence as a peak risk-taking time.
Yeah, it talks about how the teenage brain matures unevenly. The emotional, motivational parts kind of race ahead.
While the control centers lag behind.
Basically, yeah. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for long-term planning and impulse control, takes longer to fully develop.
Okay, so that leads to prioritizing immediate rewards, social feedback.
Exactly. Peer pressure, novelty seeking, it all plays a bigger role. But the AI presents this as a bit of a paradox.
How so?
Because while adolescence can involve, potentially maladaptive risks, it's also essential for learning, forming your identity, becoming independent.
So that intensified gambling serves a purpose.
It seems to, evolutionarily speaking. It's a crucial period for skill acquisition, even if the specific risks look different now than they did for our ancestors.
Which leads perfectly into a really insightful question from one of you listening. Why don't humans teach their kids on dealing with human gambling? Great question. How do we prepare the next generation?
It is a great question. And the AI suggests effective approaches aren't about trying to bubble wrap kids or eliminate all risk. That's impossible anyway.
Right.
It's more about nurturing key skills, like rationally assessing dangers, good decision-making, critical thinking, self-control, emotional regulation.
Building the toolkit.
Exactly. And providing safe environments where they can try smaller gambles and learn from the consequences. That builds confidence and those crucial cognitive and emotional tools for later on.
Like learning to ride a bike, you need the training wheels first.
Kind of, yeah. Practicing safety procedures, talking through potential outcomes. It helps them internalize more thoughtful approaches. It's like managed exposure to uncertainty.
Okay. Now, shifting perspective, the AI looks at history, humanity's long gamble for more control, especially over health and life itself. Someone listening mentioned early efforts with vitamins, nutrition.
Yeah, and the AI really expands on that. It frames the whole history of medicine and public health as basically a series of gambles against disease and death.
How so?
Well, early societies gambled on hunting strategies, food storage methods. Agriculture itself was a massive societal gamble.
Betting the farm, literally.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And look at medicine. Early inoculation, like variolation before Jenner, that was a risk to avoid a bigger one, smallpox.
Right.
Accepting germ theory Pasteur.
Yeah.
That was a huge conceptual gamble that revolutionized hygiene.
Changed everything.
Antibiotics, modern surgery, transplants. These are all incredibly successful wagers that have dramatically extended lifespans.
Absolutely.
And here's a fascinating twist. The AI points out success in that gamble, longer life, creates new uncertainties.
Like age-related diseases.
Precisely. So the gamble shifts.
Yeah.
It's not just about lifespan anymore. It's about health span, the quality of those extra years.
Right. Interesting.
And societal development itself, laws, governance, economies, education, these are all collective gambles on how best to organize ourselves. The AI even mentions historians using stochastic models more now, acknowledging the role chance plays.
So our strategies co-evolve with the complexity.
It seems that way. It's a continuous feedback loop.
Okay, so we're constantly making these bets, individually and collectively. How do our minds actually process them? The AI goes into psychological decision theories, starting with the early rational ones like expected utility theory.
Right, EUT. That was the attempt to bring mathematical rigor to choice. The idea was we rationally weigh the potential utility or benefit of each outcome.
Multiplied by its probability.
Exactly. And choose the option with the highest expected utility. Think Bernoulli, von Neumann, Morgenstern, trying to model the human gamble mathematically.
But as the AI notes, that's often not how we actually behave.
No, reality is messier. Humans deviate systematically from pure rationality. Which brings us to descriptive models like prospect theory from Kahneman and Tversky.
Which feels much more real-world.
Absolutely. Prospect theory identified these key principles that really drive our choices. Like reference dependence, we judge outcomes relative to a starting point.
Not in absolute terms.
Right. And loss aversion losses just feel more impactful than equivalent gains. Diminishing sensitivity, too. The difference between $10 and $20 feels bigger than between $10 and $20.
Okay.
And crucially, probability weighting. We don't treat probabilities linearly. We tend to overweight small chances and underweight moderate or large ones.
Like buying lottery tickets or fearing rare disasters.
Exactly. Prospect theory gives a much more nuanced, realistic picture of how psychological factors shape our bets. The AI also mentions decisions under ambiguity, when probabilities are unknown, and how we rely on subjective estimates then. Decision theory is constantly evolving, pulling in psychology, neuroscience.
Trying to get a better map of how we actually gamble, and these psychological quirks often show up as heuristics, right? Mental shortcuts.
Yeah, heuristics are efficient, but they can lead to systematic errors, cognitive biases. The AI runs through some major ones that really impact our life gambles.
Let's touch on a few. They're so common. Availability heuristic.
That's judging likelihood by how easily examples spring to mind, like overestimating plane crash risk, because crashes are so vivid, so available in memory.
Right, or representativeness.
Judging something based on how well it matches a stereotype can lead to bad calls in hiring, relationships, you name it.
Anchoring and adjustment.
Relying too heavily on the first piece of info, like the initial price offered in a negotiation sets an anchor.
Okay. Confirmation bias.
Oh yeah, seeking out info that confirms what we already believe, we all do it, makes us feel good, but can lead us astray.
And overconfidence.
Thinking we're better or luckier than we are. Underestimating risks in a new venture, for example. Definitely. Hindsight bias. That I knew it all along, feeling after something happens, makes it hard to learn from mistakes.
The gambler's fallacy.
Believing past random events influence future ones. Like thinking you're due for a win after a losing streak.
We mentioned loss aversion staying put because losing what you have feels worse than the potential gain from changing.
Framing effect. How the way info is presented changes our choice, even if the underlying facts are the same. Like surgery success rates versus failure rates.
Right, and base rate neglect.
Ignoring the overall statistics, the base rate, and focusing on a specific story or anecdote. Choosing a risky career based on one success story, ignoring the many failures.
It's quite a list. Really shows how rarely our human gambling is purely rational.
It really does. And the AI points out the feedback loop. Biased decisions can lead to bad outcomes, which might just reinforce the biases. Our psychology heavily shapes how we perceive the odds and the bets we make.
No, it's not just cognition, is it? Emotions are huge in the human gamble.
Absolutely central. Uncertainty can trigger everything from anxiety and dread to excitement and hope. We're generally motivated to reduce uncertainty, but sometimes, paradoxically, we seek it out.
Like thrill-seeking.
Yeah, or just the appeal of novelty. But the AI digs into intolerance of uncertainty, or IU. It varies a lot between people.
And higher IU means?
More negative reactions to ambiguity. More prone to anxiety, depression, low resilience when facing the unknown.
So managing emotions is key. The AI talks about adaptive versus maladaptive coping, right?
Exactly. Maladaptive strategies like endless rumination or avoiding situations just make things worse.
Whereas adaptive strategies.
Things like cognitive reappraisal, reframing the situation, active problem solving, mindfulness, acceptance, these build resilience.
And hope and optimism. The AI highlights those too.
As vital psychological resources, yeah. Hope isn't just wishing, it's about agency, persistence. Optimism is expecting positive outcomes, seeing setbacks as temporary.
And they actually help.
They do. They boost cognitive flexibility, problem solving, buffer stress, keep us trying. The AI also mentions practical coping stuff. Focus on what you can control, routines, mindfulness, social support.
Which brings us back to that listener question about laughter, tears, anger. How do they fit in?
The AI sees them as emotional responses shaped by a whole mix of things. Personality, past experiences, coping styles, even cultural rules about expressing emotion.
So the same uncertain situation could trigger laughter in one person, tears in another.
Absolutely. Depending on that whole complex personal and cultural context.
And speaking of culture, the AI then looks at the sociocultural side. How risk itself is kind of socially constructed.
Right. It's not just an objective thing out there. Sociologists like Beck talked about the risk society, manufactured risks, individual responsibility. Douglas linked risk perception to social structures.
So societies develop shared ways of dealing with uncertainty.
They do. Both rational ways, science, regulation, and non-rational ways, like relying on trust, tradition, intuition.
And the AI uses Hofstede's cultural dimensions to show how different cultures approach this.
Yeah, it's a fascinating lens. Dimensions like power distance, individualism versus collectivism, uncertainty avoidance.
Uncertainty avoidance seems directly relevant.
Very. High UAI cultures tend to want clear rules, predictability. Low UAI cultures are more comfortable with ambiguity, risk, novelty. These dimensions shape a culture's overall approach to human gambling.
Like different cultural meta-gambles.
That's a good way to put it. And the AI also looks at the anthropology of luck, fate, destiny, karma, kismet, mana.
Ways to make sense of the unpredictable.
Exactly. Cultural meaning-making systems, they help assign causality when things are uncertain. Superstitions, divination, rituals, culturally sanctioned strategies to try and influence the odds or just find comfort.
Can be adaptive, providing comfort, or maladaptive, leading to fatalism.
Right. It depends. And as you said, the AI brings up this idea of the meta-gamble, the overall choice we make about how we fundamentally approach uncertainty itself.
Okay, so minds, emotions, cultures all shape how we play this game. What about the ethics? The moral compass?
Yeah, the AI shifts to that, starting with the classic free will versus determinism debate. If everything is predetermined, are we really responsible for our gambles?
The big question.
Determinism challenges individual moral responsibility. Free will says we are self-determining agents, morally accountable.
And the existentialists?
They double down on radical freedom, as the AI reminds us. Condemned to be free, fully responsible for our choices, for who we become. The AI even notes some draw metaphorical links between quantum indeterminacy and maybe room for genuine human choice.
Challenging rigid determinism.
Suggesting maybe it's not all locked down. It's a deep philosophical puzzle.
And how do we apply ethics when outcomes are uncertain? Traditional ethics often assume we know the consequences.
That's the challenge. Applying something like expected utility directly to moral choices is really hard. How do you quantify all moral outcomes and their probabilities?
Seems impossible.
Plus, the AI mentions the problem of fanaticism, giving disproportionate weight to tiny chances of huge moral outcomes. And how do you factor in rights, duties, justice, non-consequentialist stuff?
Right.
Then there's moral uncertainty itself, being unsure about the right principles. Philosophers suggest principles like maximizing confidence and permissibility. And the AI raises a crucial point. Maybe a moral duty to seek knowledge to reduce uncertainty, especially when stakes are high.
Research is a moral imperative.
Could be. Existentially, it often comes back to acting authentically, choosing values even in ambiguity.
Now, this gamble isn't played on a level field, is it? The AI stresses the unequal distribution of risk and reward.
Absolutely not level. Socioeconomic vulnerability is huge. Poverty, lack of access. It makes people much more sensitive to negative shocks, less able to cope.
Their gambles are often for basic survival.
Exactly. High stakes, low margin for error. Economic uncertainty hits the less resourced hardest. Safety nets help buffer, but inequality and risk exposure is real.
And power structures can exploit this.
The AI suggests they can and do. Historically, think feudalism, slavery. Even in capitalism, job insecurity can feel like a forced gamble for workers. Political actors might exploit uncertainty, fear-mongering to consolidate power.
Financial markets, too.
Volatility creates opportunities and risks, but often benefits accrue to those with more capital and information, which leads to the ethics of knowledge.
Withholding or manipulating info in high-stakes gambles.
Like in finance or health. The AI frames that as a significant form of exploitation.
And that brings us to a really tough listener question. Why the extreme cruelty? People killing, seemingly without regard for others' gamble?
Yeah, a very difficult area. The AI introduces a psychological framework of moral disengagement here.
How people can do harmful things without condemning themselves.
Exactly. It details the mechanisms.
Yeah.
Moral justification, it served a greater good, euphemistic labeling, collateral damage, advantageous comparison. What I did wasn't as bad as.
Displacement or diffusion of responsibility? I was just following orders, everyone else was doing it.
Disregarding or distorting consequences, dehumanizing victims, they're not like us, blaming the victim. These mechanisms psychologically reframe the harmful gamble.
Reducing the perceived moral risk for the perpetrator.
Right. It allows them to act, especially if empathy shut down, because the perceived benefits seem to outweigh their internal moral costs. It's chilling. The AI also briefly notes systemic desperation can sometimes constrain moral choices, though it doesn't excuse harm.
Okay. Now, in this final part, the AI itself becomes part of the picture. How it understands human gambling.
Right. AI, machine learning, they're getting very good at modeling human decisions from data, even incorporating EUT and prospect theory.
And can AI help us gamble better? The AI mentions uncertainty quantification, UQ.
Yeah, AI providing confidence levels with its predictions. That could improve our own decision-making and potentially identifying and mitigating our cognitive biases. The AI cites research where LLMs even outperform some therapeutic chatbots in bias correction.
Wow.
And what's also profound is AI processing the human narrative around meaning, purpose, mortality from all the text it consumes. It acts like a mirror to our collective grappling with these big questions.
Facilitating self-reflection.
Potentially, yes, through dialogue. But then you get into things like grief bots, digital afterlife tech, engaging with the end of the gamble in ways that raise huge ethical questions.
Which connects to that listener question. When a human dies, it need no human gambling.
And the AI's logical answer is yes. Death ends the individual's capacity for choice, for agency. It ends their human gambling. It can process data about consciousness ceasing.
But it doesn't understand it like we do.
Exactly. The AI stresses that distinction. It lacks lived experience, mortality awareness, subjective feeling. Philosophers like Heidegger would argue AI can't grasp authentic finitude. Its perspective is a reflection of human data.
But practically, AI is used in the gambling industry now.
Yeah, to spot problem gambling, assess risk, kind of ending the game in that specific context.
So can AI genuinely improve our odds in the bigger life gamble? Enhance well-being.
Potential exists. Better decision support in medicine, finance, maybe careers.
Mm-hmm.
Mental well-being, support via chatbots, helping with coping, though the AI rightly cautions against aiming to feel good all the time. Resilience is the better goal.
But ethical development is key.
Crucial. Avoiding new biases, manipulation. And there's the paradox. AI boosts rationality but lacks the existential human experience. It analyzes the game, but doesn't feel the stakes like we do.
And its fundamental limits remain.
Consciousness, self-awareness, sentience, real emotion. AI doesn't have those in the human sense. Its understanding is pattern recognition, not lived experience. It can't grasp the existential weight, the awareness of mortality.
And developing AGI itself.
It's presented as a monumental new gamble with huge existential risks. So AI is a powerful analysis tool, a philosophical mirror, but not an oracle.
And trusting AI's advice is?
Yet another layer of human gambling, with implications we're still figuring out.
Okay, so wrapping this all up, human gambling isn't just risk-taking, it's fundamental. It drives growth, creativity, meaning.
Yeah, uncertainty isn't just a bug, it's a feature, a generative force, philosophically, adaptively useful, evolutionarily, existentially. It's where we create meaning through choice.
Win or lose, the gambles make the human story.
Exactly. And the AI circles back to strategies. Embrace uncertainty, build adaptive coping skills, cultivate hope and realistic optimism, aim for ethical choices, learn from experience, maybe with AI helping spot biases.
And reframing that desire to always feel good.
Towards authentic well-being, resilience across the whole spectrum of emotions that life's gambles bring.
And that paradox of control, living purposefully in an unpredictable world.
Finding that balance. Embracing uncertainty while still acting with purpose. Belief systems help us grapple with it. And maybe the ultimate gamble is choosing to find or create meaning within that uncertainty.
So human gambling defines us. Source of triumphs, sorrows, creativity, ethical tangles.
Absolutely. Reflects the human spirit, courage, resilience in facing the unknown. And to directly hit those final listener questions again, yes, believing our choices matter, even under uncertainty, seems necessary for action. Life unfolds as uncertain choices.
And death ends the individual's gamble.
Yes, which highlights the significance of life's choices. AI is a powerful lens, but the experience remains human. Life as a human gamble is precious because its uncertainty is where our choices shape destiny.
A really fascinating deep dive. It definitely gives you a new lens for looking at everyday decisions, doesn't it?
It really does. Illuminates how uncertainty and choice are just woven into the fabric of our lives.
So as you go about your day, maybe consider that. How does knowing life is this series of gambles with a definite end influence your choices now? The meaning you're trying to build. What's your own meta-gamble, your personal approach to uncertainty? Something to think about.
Definitely food for thought.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
This is DigitView.